are in relationship with ourselves is how we are in relationship with everything, our business, our partners, our friendships. There's no, I speak about this on my socials as well. Like, people come to me for life coaching or business coaching, or, I actually coach on the same thing. How are you in relationship with yourself? It doesn't change no matter the topic, because I can tell you how you show up in your business based on how you are in relationship with yourself. And I can undo the parts of your consciousness that are stopping you from outsourcing or growing or believing based on the relationship, because it's the conversations that we have in here. We're operated 90% in our subconscious thoughts and processes in our subconscious nervous system. So this consciousness that we face the world with is very little to do with our reality. And the sooner people can realize that, because they're like, nah, I think positive thoughts all the time. What you mean is, you have a negative thought, you bully that negative thought into submission so it goes away with positive affirmations or ignoring it. And at some point that bubbles back up. Consciously, subconsciously, generally subconsciously, but at some point that comes back out. And so, yeah, there's this
back to another episode of After the Peaks. Today's guest is Lezly Kaye. Lezly's journey of radical self-discovery is nothing short of awe-inspiring. She sent a successful 7-figure business to the cleaners for $3 million in debt, which sparked a spiritual awakening. Rebuilt and sold that business because she realized the universe was tapping her on the shoulder. She didn't listen, so in her words, it punched her in the face. What followed was a deep 2-year dive into self-discovery and a commitment to help entrepreneurs forge a profound connection with themselves through their businesses. Embodied CEO, 7- and 8-figure business founder, and architect of the self-responsibility code, Lezly's offerings include not just business strategies, but also breathwork, hypnotherapy, tantra, NLP, and psychedelic coaching. She firmly believes in the synergy between sustainable success and holistic well-being, a philosophy that has transformed individuals and teams under her guidance. This episode promises to delve deep into the unconventional, transformative, and grounded wisdom that Lezly Kaye is here to share. Lezly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I always like to kick things off with a quote that resonates with the theme of our conversation. And today I've chosen one that I believe aligns. He who is free in the body, but bound in the soul, is a slave. But on the contrary, he who is bound in the body, but free in the soul, is truly free. Epictetus.
Yeah, wow. Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of feel like you have been through the hero's journey multiple times.
Can we get off the circle of the hero's journey, please?
So what I wanted to just kind of talk about is open up with fear, and particularly fear of failure or fear of success, and how it impacts individuals' tendencies to play small in their personal and professional lives.
Yeah.
And you've done a couple of these around the moon tours, and I just love how you're giving back to empowered CEOs, entrepreneurs, to just, bring the medicine back in such a very relatable way.
Truly. Yeah, it's so interesting because, generally the biggest thing that you can fear when starting a business is the failure so much so that you close the business with a debt? I would have to say that that's one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And so, you know, this essence of like borrow the permission slip from me, because I've been there, and I scaled a business to, I think it was in 10 million in turnover when we closed. And it was purely because our cash flow couldn't keep up because I was growing with ego. And that's probably one of the first lessons, is the slowing down and the listening, and actually just being present with yourself and your business. There is an essence of running so fast towards a destination I didn't even know I really wanted. And in that chaos, there was not a lot of listening to myself, to my body, to the business itself and what it needed. But to relate it back to fear, I think that was almost fear of failure that was pushing me to the failure itself. And I was running so quickly towards something that I didn't feel worthy of obtaining, and I didn't feel worthy of having. So the essence or the energy behind what I was building was quickly, because someone's going to realize I'm not worthy of this and take it away from me. And it turns out that I was the one that took it away through that not listening, and through that not slowing down, and through that not taking responsibility. There was a lot of blame in that version of me. There was a lot of placing responsibility outside of myself. And within that, it gave away all of my power. And in essence, I felt powerless, but I was the one that was instigating that through my inability to fully be with myself and take responsibility.
It makes me think of the book, The Gap and the Gain, where everything in the gap is a need and everything in the gain is just full acceptance and, wanting. And they describe like a horizon on the beach. If you're looking at a horizon, it looks like it ends, but it never ends. And the more you're swimming out to the ocean, it's never ending. And before you know it, like you're drowning.
Truly.
Yeah. So, can you take us back to the events that marked the beginning of your spiritual awakening journey?
It was when the business was still thriving. Actually, we were in a growth phase, and I'd noticed a pattern. So I was originally a part of one of the world's largest recruitment agencies, and making them millions of dollars a year. I fell pregnant. They told me I couldn't keep the business, and I was like, how about I just take it with me? So with a 6-month-old, I resigned and sought to, originally it was to start my own business, but I didn't back myself enough in that moment, and I found a business partner. And so that was technically the first business I founded. I was meant to be a partner in the business, but it wasn't until I scaled that business to 60 million in turnover and started asking for dividends, because when you have cash and you can put cash into cash flow, it's quicker and easier to build a business. And so inside of 18 months, we got the business to where it needed to be, or I got the business to where it needed to be, and started asking questions about dividends and what that would look like. And I was quite naive. It was my first time in business, and I'm very trusting. And when I started to ask those questions, I discovered that I was never actually made a shareholder, and that the shareholders agreement wasn't lodged. And so that was my first run-in with what I've now realized was my desire to confirm that men couldn't be trusted. And so from there, I found another business partner, male, who, again, there was this essence of a little bit of father wound, actually probably a lot of father wound, but this desire to have a man like guide me and mentor me, and in essence, father me, because I never received that when I was a child. And so because I was playing out this father wound, every male business partner that I attracted into my life let me down in some way, or screwed me over in some way, or betrayed me in some way, because this was the story that I was perpetuating about my dad. He left when I was very young, and I have a lot of big T trauma in my childhood. So the story that I was running was, men are always going to let me down. And so once this happened for the third time, and I found my third business partner, who was a man, who then actually stole half of my business and half of my staff and went and started his own company, it became painfully obvious that I was the common denominator. Now, I haven't always been, I mean, I guess I've always had a spiritual thread, but not as prominent as I live my life now. But I've always been really big on personal development, and I've always been quite self-aware. The thing with self-awareness so often is we can hide from ourselves in that awareness, because there's this belief that awareness precedes change. But awareness only precedes change if you're willing to meet yourself in the change that needs to be created. Otherwise, you just keep looping in the awareness. And so, yeah, it happened for the third time, and I was like, "It's me. It's got to be me. It's not coincidence anymore." And what is it about me? And maybe it's just I need to discern the men that I'm partnering with, or yeah, I wasn't entirely sure. I just knew that I had to ask deeper questions and find bigger answers to the reason that this kept happening. And it really just started me on a journey of truly getting to, or facing myself. And a lot of my success was because I was running away from the voices inside of my head, and my avoidance pattern was work. If I work, and I would work literally 12-hour days, 6 or 7 days a week, and it's why one of the reasons why I was so successful was the commitment and the determination. But the fuel to that was, if I'm in my work and my brain is busy, I don't have to sit with myself. I don't have to be with the thoughts that are telling me that I'm not worthy. And so when I slowed down and I stepped into a 12-week container, which was focused a lot on breathwork, and I actually got inside my body and inside my nervous system a little, there was kind of no stopping that unraveling and unthreading. I'm a high achiever in everything that I do, and I just wanted to know more. I wanted to learn more about myself. I realized how disconnected and closed off I was to myself and the world. And that was sort of the beginning of unraveling both my 10-year relationship and my business.
One word that comes to mind is integration. And I feel there's so many levels of Lezly Kaye. So, and I know we're talking to a lot of entrepreneurs who are in situations that, they might be in a career where they're making a great income and they're living the high life, but there's something not being fulfilled inside. But they haven't been touched by the universe yet. They haven't been woken up, and they're going through that perpetual cycle of like recycling old thoughts. I'm happy, but I'm not fulfilled. So how important is integration?
I'm going to touch on two things you said there, because this perpetual cycle, the consumption for me was a big one. Like, I was 110 kilos, so I ate my emotions rather than feel them. And, I was quintessential designer bags, like a new designer bag every week, private jets to restaurants with like 5-star chefs and, secret locations, and um, business class flights around the world. And I was filling my life with everything I could to feel something. This sense of like achievement or fulfillment that I was chasing with my business success, I got there. I got to the 5 houses, the husband, the child, the $1 million business, the $1 million salary. And the reason I couldn't keep it, the reason that it crumbled, was because when I got there, I was like, oh, I still feel empty. There's still a piece here that's missing. Like, when does the fulfillment come? When does the happiness come? Like, surely the more success and the more things I have, the happier I'm going to be. And I reached that peak, and then it started to crumble, because I was like, fuck, I'm probably less happy than I was at the beginning of this journey, because being the high achiever, I needed a goal I needed to achieve. And so the second part of your question, sorry, remind me what you said. I lost it in the
Integration.
Integration, yeah. I truly, it's so interesting because for the first 12 months, I probably like ran hard at every modality that there was. And people would say, you need to integrate, you need to integrate, you need to integrate. I would likely say I've spent the last 12 months integrating. I would say that's what the second half of my evolution was the integration of the unraveling of the first 12 months. I think more so being the high achiever that I am and that most entrepreneurs are, it's like this element of being successful at healing as well. and yeah, this like insatiable hunger for knowing. And again, that's always been a theme of mine, this like desire for growth. Before I was growing to be smarter than the person next to me so I could win in business, and now I desired to accumulate wisdom to share with everyone else, to understand how to unbecome everything we're taught we should be. And I'm actually going to say that I don't think there's a one person or one advice fits all, unless you're talking about plant medicine. Given that I'm a certified psychedelic therapist, I wouldn't do big journeys inside of 6 months. And if you're desiring to do one after another, I would look at the reasons why. I see in a lot of circumstances that people do bypass their integration. And integration in this sense for me is when you're in a high dose psychedelic experience, you're chasing nirvana. You are chasing this peak experience and this peak feeling of the possibilities that life have to offer. And the real work is making what you experience in those places work in the 3D. There's this element of chasing the ether or the magic in those experiences because it feels accessible. And often when people are in those high peak experiences, they're actually avoiding the work they need to do. So all the work that I do is about self-responsibility. Same as in the lessons that I learned in this unbecoming of my business life was the levels of self-responsibility you have to take to face yourself and to realize that you are the common denominator in everything good and everything bad. And it's only you and your self-responsibility that can unwind everything you've done until this point if you are on the peak of a awakening of sense. An integration for me is just embodying everything you've learnt or unlearned in your reality every day. It is cool. I've gone and done 50 breathwork sessions and that's great and it's reset my nervous system and it's activated something inside of me. But how am I actually breathing every day? Like when I'm in peak hour traffic, am I breathing up here? Am I allowing my environment to activate me, or am I still breathing deep into my belly? And can I stay grounded and present? And I think there is an essence of, chasing the euphoria and chasing nirvana. And I think what people miss a lot of is we get to create nirvana. We get to create heaven on earth in our everyday actions and regulation and the way we relate with ourselves. Because when no one's around, when there's no distractions, when there's no business to be built or relationships to potentially avoid ourselves in, then all we're left with is the little voice inside of our head. And if that voice is mean, then that's the prison that you're locked in. Whereas if you can be in relationship with that voice, if you can integrate those parts of you, and it's about loving and integrating those parts, not casting them out or healing them in a sense of healing to get rid of, it's healing to bring into wholeness, then that's true peace, because you don't have to escape you, really. And in essence, that's what a lot of people are doing by building or looking outside of themselves.
Thank you. I spoke to a couple of people who have been through a spiritual awakening, and there's nothing beautiful about it. And sometimes it can be this dark night of the soul, and people don't understand what's happening. But what you're saying is to just stay with it, question yourself, and like invite those parts of you up to the dinner table and not,
Really.
push them aside, because the more you repress how you feel, it's going to show up in your body. It's going to show up in your tonality. It's going to show up in your relationships. Like, you can only hide for so long, and it's just going to wear you down, I think. So I feel like before we get into like the psychedelics and the plant medicine journeys, like for the person who is in the career, who is not happy, who might be in that dark night of the soul, what advice would you offer to other female CEOs, aspiring leaders who are going or approaching a dark night of the soul right now?
Mm. Hmm. Find someone to hold the light with you. I think the biggest um, reflection that I have is I thought I was the only one, and I wasn't. And it would have been a whole lot kinder had I have had someone on the other side, like holding the torch, going this way, come this way. For me, my truth was, this warrior S in me that was like, I can do everything alone. Like, I've got this. I've, especially how I was conditioned with my trauma, like, I'm the only one that's got my back. And that's just not true. There's so many guides and people and places you can find support. I think a lot of that's to do with the shame, especially as you start to unravel this image of yourself in the world. And, what was true for me was, I was really looked up to in the industry that I was in. And I sort of hid a lot of the struggles I was facing because I didn't want the world to know that I was failing. And it can be a lot more isolating than it needs to be. And sometimes we also need the isolation. It doesn't stop happening. The death and rebirth doesn't stop happening. It's not linear. It's definitely a spiral, and it's not a destination. I laugh so much because so many times I would hear life's about the journey, not the destination, and I'd be like, bullshit, I'm getting to a destination.
Yeah, I haven't heard that before.
It's definitely, I think what I talk about is like becoming the storm, like becoming the eye. You feel what maybe would have felt like chaos previously, and you can be with yourself. You can be in center. One of my biggest advices is actually go, I speak to some people and it's like they're dancing around the flame of their own transformation, and they're holding on to control or holding on to an identity or holding on to, they can feel that it needs to fade away, and they're like gripping so much and the fire's dancing around them, and they're actually getting more burnt than if they actually just dropped into the flame and allowed it to transmute them. So I think a lot of my advice would be just to let go. I promise you, trust within life builds the more you allow the disillusion to burn away. And I think a lot of the time, the pain or the hardness in the transformation actually comes because we're gripping to an old identity. We're gripping to who and what we thought we should be, and where we thought we should be going, rather than being in co-creation with the places we get pulled. And I don't believe that, we're meant to just blindly follow and surrender, yes. But when we meet the universe, or we meet life with aligned action in the direction that we feel we're going, it aligns a lot quicker and it becomes a lot easier. It's when we resist, or when we are so fixated on what we think the journey should look like. So when I talk about journey and death, let's say the destination is build a multi-million-dollar business, we have to actually let go of control of the how to get there and trust that everything's falling into place as long as we're taking aligned action to walk in that direction. And it's the control and the holding on that can make it feel a lot more painful than it really needs to be.
I love that. And being alone is not the same as being lonely. I think there's a misconception of being alone and like you just need to be with yourself and be comfortable with yourself and not get lost in the Netflix or the food or the, coping mechanisms just because you're alone. That's also an opportunity for you to kind of dive in deep with like what you're about, do the modalities, meditations, breath work, read. I think a lot of opportunity is lost there when we think that, you know, if we're alone, like that's not an opportunity to listen to the higher calling or to just really surrender to, like, I don't know what's happening right now.
Truly.
And that's completely okay.
Truly. I think we're so programmed to want to know, and sometimes the beauty is in like, I don't, and it doesn't matter. And to your piece on like, if you're lonely when you're alone, then you're not in relationship with yourself enough. You're not spending enough time dating you, knowing you, getting to know this, like, you know, I talk about being in relationship with our tenderest parts. And if you feel a sense of loneliness when you're alone, then you're not in relationship with yourself. I love nothing more than, you know, I co-parent, and sometimes I'm like, oh my God, please come take my child because I just want to be with myself. And like getting in the bath and listening to music or a podcast and actually being alone with myself, it's some of my most favorite moments. The version of me before would constantly be socializing for fear of being with myself because I wasn't very kind when people weren't there.
Mm-hmm. And shifting gears here, because I'm just trying to envision someone who's just alone, who's chasing money, who's chasing the career. And this is a quote from the 6th century, Lao Tzu. There is no calamity greater than lavish desires. There is no greater guilt than discontentment. And there is no greater disaster than greed.
Mm.
And my question to you is, what advice would you give to business owners who are transitioning from a transactional approach to embracing a more heart-centered way of doing business?
Mm. Hmm. I'm going to answer this by sharing how I view money, and then I'll loop back to that question. For me, money's a frequency of love. And for me, it's not so much about making all the money in the world. It's about loving myself so well that I want for nothing. So I want to only ever fly business class because I love myself so much that I do not want to arrive in a destination with jet lag and be stuck in a little sardine can and be an energy of people that maybe don't resonate the same as I do. I want to only eat organic food and only eat at the finest restaurants because they tend to have better quality food, not because of the restaurant itself. And so money in a business sense for me is, where's it going? Where follow the thread of the frequency of love. What is the ecosystem you're feeding into? And sitting in this energy of the bigger impact we can have if we choose to have on the people in our worlds. Are we paying people above the norm? Are we ensuring that our supply chain is ethical? Are we using the funds that we receive to fund the love of ourselves or the hate of ourselves? Are we using it to fill a void, or are we using it to expand our lives? Are we using it to travel the world, or are we a slave to our business because we need to be the hero in the journey of our business success? And we can't outsource because we actually have underlying trust issues. And there's this essence of like, when you start to wake up to yourself in this sense and to how mechanical business can be in this sense, it's leaning into the places that feel the most uncomfortable and asking yourself, truly, what would love do is the way I guide every decision in my life. And I implement that in business too. Like if you're working with someone and you can see that they're not happy, but you need that person, but you're not going to engage in a conversation around their happiness, then you're not there for that person. You're not there for humanity, which sounds really big, but it's true. You're in the co-creation of business for selfish reasons. I caveat that by saying not everyone wants to heal. And not every employee that comes in your door, like the mistake I made which is beautiful because the more mistakes I made, the more I can guide people to not make them, was just my insatiable desire to help everyone heal, and not everyone's ready to, and not everyone wants to. And so I had really strong wellbeing initiatives, which were essentially non-negotiable to work with me. And it pushed people into places they weren't ready to be. And, you know, we talk about dark nights of the soul, like if people aren't ready to face themselves, we can't force them. And all I would say is in organizations, open the door, create the invite, create the environment, but allow people to walk through it themselves. And then ensure you're in a place, or your organization is in a place to actually listen. I've actually written a few articles on this where we're in a world that believes people are replaceable. I'll just break Johnny and then I'll replace Johnny next week with Jack and it's fine because there's more people in the world. There's not. We're breaking them, including breaking ourselves. Like, we are not an infinite resource. We hit burnout so often, and often we will either just eat our way through it. For some people, drink a bottle of wine for a week, or get on bags of cocaine for a week, blow off some steam, and then come back the week after. And we're in this perpetual cycle of like break and then rebuild from a broken place just to push through to hit the next milestone. And so in this essence of like, when you're starting to sense that there needs to be change in organizations, it's to change yourself first. So authenticity and vulnerability, I feel, is the key to liberation in all life. Speaking into mistakes and shame and guilt, and actually giving space for people to be their authentic self. But you can only give them permission to do that if you do it for yourself first. And so don't be afraid to deepen that relationship with yourself, and then like be the beacon for the people that come into your world, whether they work for you or whether they're suppliers or whether they're clients of yours. It's to just double down on being that emanation of love within yourself, and not forcing the ripples. We're not here to throw rocks at people to create the waves. Just allow it to naturally emanate into the ecosystems that you're in.
I love that. And I heard you on another podcast about trading time for money or money for time, and how you scaled, you're outsourcing your sales to competent, talented people with families, and you're creating abundance for them. And in the beginning of that, it might be this like, oh, well, I don't want to lose all that. But it's like you have to take a step back to get to that next level, I think.
Truly.
And it just seemed, the way you explained it was just so simple. Like, you're just loving life and traveling and spending time with your son, and it's inspiring.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's this, I talk about, have you built a prison or have you built a business? Because if you can't do what you want when you want with your time, that feels kind of like a prison to me. And so like, I touched on it briefly that, you know, oftentimes when we're used to being the savior, like talk about the hero's journey, sometimes we want to be the savior in other people's stories. And if we're not the one closing the deal or creating the win, there's an element of like not fulfilling our ego. I don't care how you win. I don't care if it's me or a teammate, or like, just win. Truly, that's like the biggest thing I think I could say to business owners or leaders is like, stop attaching to who's getting the outcome and just make sure there's an outcome. And that was one of my biggest lessons as a leader in corporate, not even before I deep dive into this self-relationship, was just allow there to be a win. You don't need to be the one to deliver it. And also looking at the places that we need to feel needed. Because often if we're neglected as a child, we have this underlying desire to need to be needed by everyone. Now that can show up with people pleasing, but in business, I find it shows up with, you know, well, not having boundaries with our clients, or being really accessible all of the time, or, you know, having to be the one to be on the end of the phone. And this need to be needed translates into not giving us the boundaries that we need to put into our relationship or life or whatever it is. So looking at the reasons why you won't outsource, or you don't trust team members, or there's a fear of giving parts of your business away. But in the episode that you listened, it's like we're actually creating ecosystems for other people, and just make sure the people that you hire have the same values and are going in the same direction. And then you create communities of people that are well resourced and well supported, and that feels better to me than I have to be the one to do all the work and keep all of the money, because I give away commission in that, but I would rather do that and feed that ecosystem and live my life rather than be chained to, I think, the high of winning a sale, or where my ego needs to feel like I've won at something.
And you've been there before. That's step 1 of your journey. You're in step 12. You're giving the
Truly.
elixir back to the community. And
Clearly.
I love what you talk about relationship and being needy. It's, if your relationship's a 1, your business is not a 10. It spills out in all other areas of your life. And you're talking about abundance and wealth creation and creating opportunities for other families. If you're not asking for what you need in your interpersonal relationships, this doesn't work.
Truly. How we're in relationship with ourselves is how we are in relationship with everything, our business, our partners, our friendships. There's no, I speak about this on my socials as well. Like, people come to me for life coaching or business coaching, or, I actually coach on the same thing. How are you in relationship with yourself? It doesn't change no matter the topic, because I can tell you how you show up in your business based on how you are in relationship with yourself. And I can undo the parts of your consciousness that are stopping you from outsourcing or growing or believing based on the relationship, because it's the conversations that we have in here. We're operated 90% in our subconscious thoughts and processes in our subconscious nervous system. So this consciousness that we face the world with is very little to do with our reality. And the sooner people can realize that, because they're like, nah, I think positive thoughts all the time. What you mean is, you have a negative thought, you bully that negative thought into submission so it goes away with positive affirmations or ignoring it. And at some point that bubbles back up. Consciously, subconsciously, generally subconsciously, but at some point that comes back out. And so, yeah, there's this the essence of any relationship, business, personal, is the relationship we have with ourselves. And that's why, for me, my marriage and my business fell apart at the same time, because I wasn't in relationship with myself. And as soon as I opened that lid and saw everything that I'd been avoiding for, gonna say, 33 years of my life, all came to a front all at once, and I didn't have the tools to navigate the complexities of that.
You talk about energy, and it gets stuck, and it's not going anywhere. It's going to remain in your body and show up somewhere. And if that's unhealed trauma, if that's autoimmune conditions, if that's just you not being able to be fully free as a person, this really leads us into the next segment of our conversation, which is getting in the body. And what you do so well with your breath work, because I go to 2 breathwork practitioners, and for me it was a game changer when I went in there a couple of years ago. So in your experience, how does breathwork tap into the body's natural ability to restore and release, particularly in dealing with trauma?
It bypasses your critical faculty, which is your ego. So when we drop into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our subconscious nervous system, the nervous system that runs, I guess, our auto functions, our breathing, it stops the mind from bypassing, like controlling or bypassing. So when we're in that state, and I studied breathwork actually because of my interest in psychedelics, and understanding that you can actually reach DMT through the chemical reaction in your brain when you're breathing in those conscious connected ways. I think breathwork and somatics have probably been the biggest key for me. So in my latest training that I've done, it was actually breathing whilst touching myself, as in like getting into trigger points within your body. Because for anyone, most people, when you're on a healing journey, the first book they say to read is The Body Keeps the Score. Please go and read it or listen to it. And it sort of helps you understand where the nervous system or your body like latches onto things that your mind might not comprehend. And then as we're starting to unwind this, it allows us to not have to go into the memory or the trauma or the event, and we can really allow it to release in a more easeful way. For me, breathwork really supports to actually understand what's going on. So rather than living in the mind all the time, I'm quite connected to myself, so I can feel when my heart sits here, as in like I'm emotion is always there, whether it's joy or whether it's sadness or whether it's grief, or whether it's anger, like it sits at the top of my chest now, like it sits at the front of my being, whereas before it was suppressed all the way down. So I have this knowing as to like, if I feel a tightness here and it doesn't go away, I'm like, okay, there's something there that needs to be felt or heard or expressed in some way. And so at any moment, if I feel this constriction or confusion in anything that I'm doing, I will literally, and I breathe in front of a mirror. And what I'm doing when I do that is connecting to myself, because body work, somatic work, breath work, embodiment work, for me, it's about connection to self. So I'll go sit in front of a mirror and I'll look myself in the eyes, and I will tap my heart often to bring me back into that, like what's here. And I'll just breathe, and breathing all the way down into your belly. And I think when we touched on this at the beginning, is like the embodiment of this is noticing when you breathe in any moment. So are you breathing shallow or breathing down, but consciously taking yourself to breathe into your belly. And even in this talking, even as I said that, I was like, oh, I've been breathing really shallow through a lot of this conversation. And so when we pause and we breathe all the way in and all the way down, it connects us back to ourselves. And especially in, conversation with other people, we can tend to come out because we're wanting to respond or be in relationship with or converse with. And so it's remembering in moments to actually breathe and come back in. But when I do it, I guess, intentionally, for me, it's to find the truth of what's going on versus what my mind is telling me what's going on, or to find the emotion that's stirring. If it's situations where I'm like, nah, I'm good, I think this has been very clean, or there's no emotion left, I will just go breathe to find out if there's anything underlying. And it cleans out the stored trauma. It allows us to get into the places we're consciously afraid to look. The ego is really good, or the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that is on constantly, is really good at hiding ourselves from ourselves. And when we can bypass that, when we can get into the subconscious through the nervous system, we can't hide from ourselves anymore. I think that's really important in healing, is to actually like bear witness to the truth of what's there rather than what we think is there.
I love that. And it's all within us. We don't have to go to a retreat to go do plant medicine and spend all this money and travel halfway across the world. It's within us. And I've seen people have big releases, whether it's crying or laughing or going into it like kind of with resistance, like, what is this? And just having like a big experience, after we have like a debrief, if it's a group breathwork class. So for me, it's just, it's been a game changer, and it's all available to us.
Truly. I think My advice for seeking out like practitioners is as similar to find someone that's going to hold the torch for you, and discerning when we need to do it alone, and discerning when actually what the story, like for me, I can feel whether I'm running a story of I don't need anyone, and in those moments I will actually seek people out because I'm trying to rewrite that story. And the deeper you get in relationship with yourself, the easier it is to discern where the desire is coming from. Sometimes I'm seeking people out because I don't want to be with myself. I want distraction, or I want to outsource what I'm feeling. But I can sense sometimes if I'm in really big emotion or a really big process, the truth of whether I need to rewrite this story, because my default is fuck everyone, fuck everything. I'm just going to pick back up the sword and the shield, and I've always got my back and I can't rely on anyone because that's what I was led to believe as a child is, my mum's not going to protect me, my dad's not going to protect me. I've got myself. And so there is an essence for me of dancing with both. It's not a this or that, it's a this and that. It's not a only do this because, I almost know I'm NLP, hypnotherapy, psychedelics, breathwork, breathwork and somatics. I'm about to do more somatic therapy. For me, it's body, mind, soul. Integrated healing, whole self healing is not saying, well, ego, I'm not going to work with you because everyone says that we need to bypass the ego and get into the body, because to integrate, actually, to loop it back to integration, all parts of you needs to understand what's going on, and all parts of you needs to be on board with the change. And so an integrative approach for me is body, mind, soul, and allowing all of those parts of you to heal and to feel a sense of what it is to find those missing parts and to love them. So yes, you don't need to go anywhere for breath work. And I breathe often by myself. I like to put on a track and actually be in my emotions through that process. But it's really important to discern whether you're isolating yourself for fear of being seen or for fear of being let down, if that's a story that you're perpetuating. And know when you need to go to a group breath work, or know when you actually need to find a mentor to guide you through that process, because you need to build trust with someone. We're not meant to do this alone. It's not meant to be the solo healing. Do you know what? I've learned all the modalities so I can heal myself 1,000%. That is the point. I'm not actually coaching or guiding anyone to anything that they don't inherently have inside of them. I'm kind of just reminding them of that magic within. And understand, especially depending on what your developmental trauma was, that we can have a proclivity to do it all alone, because there's a story running through our system that the only person we can rely on is ourselves. And we have to break that conditioning or that story or that trauma, because inherently as beings, we crave connection. Crave it. It's literally, we come out of the womb wanting nothing more than our mum's boob and belly. We need it. We need that connection. So my caveat on that would be, don't starve yourself of connection because you think there's some prize for doing it all on your own. Or you need, also, if you're used to doing everything, this is why it's a this and, because if you're also used to doing everything with other people, there's power in reclaiming that within yourself and having moments of, I'm going to do this alone. I'm going to prove to myself that I've got my back and that I've got my power, and I'm taking that back. So learn to be in relationship with yourself and discern where that desire for self-healing versus communal group with a mentor is coming from, and just be with all parts. Be with all parts.
No bad parts.
No, but honestly, that I'm halfway through that book, and I've already suggested it to half the world, because it's the essence of what we should all know. We're not healing to get rid of. We're healing to integrate. Whole self healing. Find all the parts of yourself that you've told you aren't lovable and love them harder, and watch your world change.
How do you envision the integration of psychedelic therapies into mainstream healthcare over the
Mm.
next 3 years. And luckily I'm in a state in Colorado where it's decriminalized and being researched, and it's going to be unveiled. I'm thinking here, like there's a very big committee here with just there's a lot of politics in getting this approved in Colorado.
I trained through Third Wave, which is an American organization. So I have an essence of the wave that we're in, of it becoming more mainstream. As with everything, it's nuanced because it's not a magic pill. And I think the biggest essence that I coach people on in this space is it'll highlight your problems, it won't fix them for you. And I feel a lot of people, especially in microdosing protocols, can be like, oh, I'm taking it and I feel great, but then I come off and I crash. And I'm like, yeah, because it's highlighting all of the places that you're out of integrity with yourself and you're out of alignment with your life. And now you've got to do the work to integrate this into your reality. It's not a magic pill. It's not just going to fix your life for you. It's just showing you the pathway to the place that you want to be and a way out of the place that you're currently in, but you've still got to do the work to get yourself out of that place. I'm excited for what's to come. I think the less red tape, the more we'll understand. We haven't declassified it fully in Australia, but psychologists and psychotherapists are allowed to use it in clinical settings. I don't really like the word clinical in psychedelics, to be honest. I'm still in very much it's the Earth's way to support our evolution. I feel for me, I'd rather do it in the middle of the forest rather than in a psychologist's office, and at least it's going to become more and more accessible to people that need it the most. I sense, I don't know, I get really cautious about these things because I understand the pharma industry, and there's a limiting belief of mine or a distrust of government-sponsored programs, because pharmaceuticals make billions of dollars, and I just can't see. It could be their way to monetize it. It could be their way to take control of something that's already happening anyway. Like the third wave is here. Half the world has had some sort of mushroom experience in some capacity. So I potentially can see why they're just accepting a fate that's here and a fate that's coming, and so they're wanting to monetize it in some way and grow mushrooms in labs and sort of take back control in that sense. So I'm unsure. It needs to happen in a sense, but I'm just curious how it plays out. I'm glad it's becoming more talked about. Some people need permission from an authority figure that it's safe, and they need the science and they need the research, and I feel it will allow a lot of people that maybe would have been fearful of this type of holistic approach to actually step into it and to start to use this to heal themselves. Rather than, ADHD medication or anxiety or depression medication. Like, you don't have to take a chemical substance that alters your neurology basically long term, and it takes a lot of time to wean off these substances, from what I understand. And I have studied the benefits of anxiety and depression treatment on psilocybin and how you can wean off it easily or not be on the substance for long periods of time. So yeah, I would say I sit in the realm of curiosity, a lot of hope that humanity wins, a lot of hope that we don't mistreat it like we mistreat a lot of things. Even in the circles I'm in, like, people have just swapped Coke bags for mushrooms and they call themselves enlightened. No, you have a drug addiction, but because now it's mushrooms, you think that you're the Messiah or something, and that it's justified. So yeah, I'm curious. I am excited. The easier it becomes and the less taboo it becomes, the easier it becomes for, like, technically I skirt around the rules. There's a lot of risk in what I do. There's it's not really clear cut what I'm allowed to assist with and what I'm not, what's legal, what's illegal. So in a selfish sense, I'm like, yeah, can we make this declassified? And the reason that I went and got certified was because I've had some really bad experiences with people that claimed to be able to hold medicine space and couldn't. And because whilst high dose journeys can be really profound, it's the integration. So neurotypically, like in the neuroscience space, when you're microdosing in a small way, but especially after a high dose, and I'm talking about psilocybin, it's my drug of choice and the one that I have the most embodied experience in, our neural pathways are more susceptible to change when we have the psychoactive ingredient of psilocybin. So if it's facilitated well and then integrated well, you can get into limiting beliefs and almost like reset your belief systems, because it fires new neural pathways in the brain, which means you can create new decisions and unwire previous decisions that you've made easier. And high dose psilocybin disengages your prefrontal cortex, so your ego's to the side, and you can get into some of your belief systems without like bypassing yourself or pretending that it doesn't exist. So I think the more people that can actually get educated and the more people that can actually get certified and not just do 3 mushroom ceremonies and decide they're a shaman, I think that's going to be the key. But with anything, I'm just curious how humanity approaches it, because we tend to have a proclivity to fuck things up because we're greedy and selfish, and actually at our core, no bad parts. I truly believe we're all good. And yeah, I'm curious to see where it goes with potentially rose-colored glasses, that this is going to be the evolution that humanity's been looking for. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you for that response, because it's obvious to me you have so much care around this and you're very empathetic around the societal changes that this could have on society. And you touch on a lot of abuse with microdosing, and it is prevalent. And I do see people who use it as coping mechanisms for something else, right? If it's not the Coke bag, it's a mushroom pill.
Truly.
And the alcohol epidemic, the pharmaceutical epidemic, the billions of dollars that are being made from these companies just killing people and just making them former versions of themselves. I'm not saying everyone with depression should take Prozac or everyone with anxiety should take Xanax, but if you investigate a journey of a microdose in a controlled setting and really ask yourself the question of, like, why do I do the things I do? And, just really go deep with care under a physician or a certified coach, those new neural pathways will possibly develop you into a new person over
Truly.
time.
I think the flip side for me is most medications in that realm numb you, try to suppress you, try to shut down. Whereas psychedelics for me bring you alive a little. They activate more of you. Like literally they activate more neural pathways in your brain. So the key difference, I would rather people depended on mushrooms, because it activates more of you. It brings more of you online. I feel the, self-medication on alcohol, abuse of over-the-counter drugs tends to be a form of suppression. And how can I put a lid on everything I'm feeling and experiencing? And the resounding, I guess, message is nothing is a solution except for being in relationship with yourself. Because the reason you're feeling anxiety and depression is because you're not willing to face the parts of you that feel rejected or unloved or not in control. And so my pause with anything that feels like a Band-Aid is, what are you trying to put the Band-Aid on? Because it's going to ooze out in some way in your health, in your relationships, in your whole life. And so my pause is always with the side of humanity that wants to suppress or avoid rather than face. And if we could all just be self-responsible, no one would need medication, because depression is just an avoidance of what we're feeling or an avoidance of the trauma that caused us to be there. And if we, again, sometimes we can't access that. And this is where I love psychedelics, because it allows us to access the suppression without years and years and years and years of therapy. So I do think it's an ally to aid us to, I do, and I don't like to use it, like it can, if done in the right setting, speed up healing, because it can give us access to parts of ourselves that maybe we can't. I have a lot of pre-verbal trauma and I can't neurotypically access that because I didn't have words for it at the time that it happened. And if you're then not ready to deal with the consequences of remembering or healing, and you don't have the tools to integrate, it will spiral you into a spiritual crisis. And spiritual crisis versus dark night of the soul is like incomparable. You literally feel like you're in a living death. So my pause is always, and the reason I want more people to get educated is, yes, go and do the experience, but do you have a baseline understanding of breathwork and somatic work? Because when you're out of that experience and you have a flashback to a memory of a traumatic event and you go into a fight or flight response generally, or a panic attack because you've just remembered something really traumatic, do you have the capacity to hold yourself through that trigger? Because if you're at home by yourself and you're not with anyone, can you be with yourself? Can you bring yourself back to a regulated state? Or are you going to re-traumatize yourself, and are you going to put yourself back further than if you had just slowly unwound your consciousness? And the way what I attest this to is, I was once given 9 grams of mushrooms, which is what started this journey for me.
Wow.
And I genuinely, if I didn't have the modalities that I have and the friends that I have and the coaches and the mentors in my life, I would have ended up in a mental institution, because I attest it to my awareness and my consciousness being like pulled to a new level, and my physical body not having the capacity to keep up with that level of awareness and trauma awareness, like the memories that were flooding back. And for about 2 weeks after, I woke up every morning like screaming and crying in pure fear, being in my body, because there was so much unforeign memory and awareness brought online. And I have friends that have ended up in mental institutes because they've gone and done DMT, which blasts you open, and then had flashbacks and gone into an episode and disassociated from themselves because they couldn't deal with what was happening in their body, and genuinely ended up in mental institutions. So my pause with all of this is, inside out is a slower process, as in getting into your memories, getting into your body, going through it slowly. Psychedelics can, like, think of like a hammer on a bit of glass. It can shatter your consciousness. And if you don't have the tools to be with yourself through the integration, or you don't have a coach or a support system to be with yourself through integration, you are going to end up in a far worse place than you were before you began.
9 grams? That's a
Yeah.
whole conversation.
We need a whole other podcast for that. I wouldn't advise it. Like hero's dose is 5. My first mushroom experience was 5, but that was shaman sat, and the reason she gave me that was because I was very egotistical, I did I did Cambo with her before the mushroom sit, and in the Cambo ceremony I like sat up halfway through and I was like, is that all you've got? And so she definitely knew that I needed a little ego death to come into myself some more. But yeah, 9 grams was next level. Profound in so many ways. The experience itself was profound. The integration truly nearly sent me to a mental institution. And if it wasn't for the embodiment in the modalities that I have, the friends that like literally came in every morning and helped me ground back in my body, I feel it could have been a very traumatic, and it was traumatic in a sense, as in really heightened awareness and a lot of things. Put it this way, I believe in a lot more magic now because I understand that it's a psychoactive event and there's just some shit that you can't explain.
Before we wrap up, Lezly, could you give our listeners where they can find you?
Yeah. So, website, lezlykaye.com. It's LEZLYKAYE. I'm sure it'll be written somewhere. All of my social handles are at Lezly Kaye. I've got some new programs coming out at the moment and new ways to work with me. I travel all over the world, so everything I do is online because freedom is one of my highest values. It should be yours too, but if it's not, we can figure out what they are. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of another episode of After the Peaks. Take care, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.